just got off the phone with a logistics company in the US, and I was just telling him how the cost of shipping to the US is killing me. And he's like, well, I guess you can blame the new NAFTA agreement. And I'm like, damn, your president. So what is this new NAFTA, as Canadians call it, or the US calls it the USMCA, that's the United States, Mexico-Canada Agreement. Mexico calls it something else, I can't remember. It's now called the USMCA. Let's face it, there's no NAFTA because there are threats of tariffs being slapped around on everyone left, right, and center. I mentioned in my previous video that I will be speaking specifically about the dairy industry in Canada, as that was one of the key topics during the trade negotiations between Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau. So that will be the focus of this video. First of all, what the hell is NAFTA? Okay. NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Agreement. It was signed back in 1994 between Canada, the US, and Mexico for free trade. Free trade as in no tariffs. Remember in my last video when I explained tariffs to you? That is, if you're going to step onto my turf and sell your stuff, it's going to cost you. So basically, 99% of all of the goods bought and sold between these countries have been pretty much tariff-free. And then there's that tiny percentage left. That's the dairy industry. So a bit about the dairy industry in Canada. So when I say dairy industry, this includes dairy, poultry, and eggs. FYI, eggs, not a dairy product. For the sake of this video, I will just refer to all these industries as simply the dairy industry. So these industries operate under a farming system in Canada called supply management and has been around since the 1960s as a way to protect farmers, because there was a period of time before that where technological advancement lowered the prices of dairy, which ultimately caused a lot of farmers to go out of business. Obviously not good. People need to work. Therefore, this supply management system was introduced, which controls prices, production limits, and imports. For example, let's say Crystal is a milk farmer. She owns a bunch of cows, she milks them, packages them, and sells them to stores. And then the stores sell them to people like you and I. How much does she sell the milk for? Well, that price is set by the supply management system. She doesn't get to choose what to sell her milk for. And also, she can only produce a certain amount of milk, which ensures there is no overproduction in the country. Milk goes bad. Finally, the government protects these farmers like Crystal because they're already capping them on prices and production. They gotta cap competition from countries, that is, imports. Remember, you gotta protect your own peeps. This is precisely how the Canadian dairy industry operates. Is this good or is it bad? Well, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and countries in the EU, they all face overproduction issues. What happens when a country or when there's too much of something produced? It drives prices down. Farmers can't make a profit, which causes businesses to close. And eventually, when too many businesses close, there ends up being a shortage of supply, a shortage of production, not enough farmers producing. And what happens when there isn't enough of a product? Prices go up, supply and demand. So then farmers start opening up for business again. It's a vicious cycle. In the past, it's not a good thing for the economy when businesses close. So what does the government do? They provide subsidies, which is simply financial aid or financial support so they don't go out of business. Canadian farmers do not receive government subsidies because they don't need it. They have production limits, they have prices, and protection from foreign competition. They're all set. Dairy farmers in Canada produce just enough to feed the whole country. And they even allow up to 10% of the dairy supply to be imported from the outside, like from the US, Europe, without any tariffs. Anything more than that, foreigners pay pretty high tariffs to enter Canada as a preventative from flooding the market. These tariffs are high, like a 270% tax rate. You may have noticed Canadians don't get a lot of variety when it comes to our cheeses. Our cheeses are pretty damn expensive. So why is the US kicking and screaming? Well, they're saying it's not fair that Canada has this type of protectionism. They want to be able to sell all of their milk to Canada because they're producing too much. even though Canada is like a fraction of the size of the US. I mean, how much milk and cheese can Canadians possibly consume? Here's the thing though. The US imposes very similar dairy restrictions as Canada. Canada imports about 10% of its overall dairy supply, while the US imports about 3% of their overall supply. Granted, the US is 10 times larger than Canada, so the dollar amount is much larger, but it's all relative. The hypocrisy. All of this noise is really coming from Wisconsin State. That state alone produces more dairy than all of Canada. They want Canada to open up their doors and allow for their products to be sold because, well, they have an overproduction problem. So why is this our problem? Well, really, it isn't. It's not Canada's fault that the US or the rest of the world produces so much dairy. That's because they don't have supply management like Canada does. Canada is the only country in the world that has this system in place. And historically, it seems to be working fine. Remember, Canada must protect their own farmers first. Yes, Canadian dairy farmers, they make a good living. They enjoy predictability in their businesses because prices and production limits are set, and thus they earn higher incomes than US farmers. From a consumer standpoint, Canadian consumers enjoy the higher standards and quality of locally produced dairy products. So Canadians do pay higher prices for dairy. I don't drink milk really. I'm Asian, it makes my stomach bubbly, but I do like cheese, and I know that cheese is expensive here. Cheaper outside, but c'est la vie. Hope you found this video very helpful in understanding what's going on in the world. Please subscribe and share this so that you and your friends know what's up.